Hey, what's up, guys? It's Ninja Bear from Bear Clan Paintball. Hey, I saw some debate about the MQ valve and maybe some misinformation or maybe some lack of knowledge. I'm by no means an expert on the MQ. All of the information that I have about it, I've gotten from other people too. So there may be points in this video where I make a mistake or two. However, I have gotten multiple guns to work with this MQ system. It is easy to understand once you understand it. After you understand it, teching it is extremely easy. There are a lot of parts for a little bitty piece, so what I'm going to try to do is I'm going to go over each piece of the MQ valve and what its function is and how the function works, and hopefully I can explain it in a way that makes sense. I'm also going to replace the O-rings and the seals so that everybody has a clear understanding of how to maintain your MQ valve if necessary. There happens to be a few different types of MQ valves. One with a bigger valve system, one specifically made for the carnivore with a different spacer in the back. Sometimes you don't even need the spacer in the back, like my GX3 didn't need one at all because of the IVG that's on there. So I'll try to discuss those. Unfortunately, all I have is this one right now without tearing apart another gun. So we're going to talk about this. The basic function of the MQ2 is basically the same across the board. So whether the valve's bigger or it's a different spacer, everything else works the same. So I'm going to do my best to hold the camera, move the camera around so you can see things in an up-close way, and we'll go over each of these parts. Okay, I'm going to do my very best here to hold the camera and demonstrate some of this stuff. So this first part here, this little screw and washer hold on the seal, and the seal seals to the front part of the valve in here, and you'll see that as we start to put it together. This is the poppet. Sorry, my camera's choosing focus, I guess. This is the poppet. The poppet goes inside the valve system. It moves back and forth to open and close the valve. The O-ring in the middle of the poppet seals against the inside of the valve system. This is the valve. The front part of the valve has a washer that seals against the body. The body size changes and also has an O-ring that seals against the back side of the valve body. Inside the valve, here we go. Inside the valve is a spring, and then behind the spring, or inside the spring, and you'll see as we put it together, is another O-ring. The O-ring fits inside the groove in the front of the valve. Let's see if I can get a good shot of that. Right there. Fits inside the groove and seals against the solenoid housing. Also known as the pilot, I guess. I just learned recently. Anyway, so this is the front of the solenoid housing, and the wiring for the MQ solenoid comes out of here. In the front, you'll notice there's a teeny little hole right there. That little hole is kind of where the magic happens as far as how the MQ system works. Next, there's three parts on here. I'm going to do my best to get an up-close shot. So this is the solenoid shaft. Let's turn off autofocus here, see if that fixes it. Cool. Alright, so there's a solenoid shaft. There's a pinch ring that prevents the solenoid from pushing in any further or back. It also is what stops or creates tension for the spring that goes on the solenoid. And it's very hard to see because it's also black, but there's a puck on the end of this solenoid shaft. You can kind of see the edge of it. It's glued on the tip of the shaft. So it is what seals the solenoid shaft inside the solenoid head, and that puck closes the hole in the solenoid head. So as the solenoid retracts this shaft, the hole opens up and changes the pressure inside the gun, which allows the poppet to open. So we'll go over that here in a little bit. So this part is optional. It's hard to see because it's white and my background's light colored. There we go. So I have a very small white spacer. Now on some guns, that white spacer is totally unnecessary. For an example, I have a Carnivore with an MQ in it, and the spacer wasn't needed at all in order to build the correct pressure. In fact, if I put the spacer on, I may not be able to get the gun to chrono low enough. So that spacer is there to increase the tension on the spring, which in turn increases the tension on the solenoid shaft and the amount of pressure between the puck and the head of the hole in the head of the solenoid housing. For the gun that I'm putting it on, it's going to be a half block, so it's a mini gun essentially. So in this case, this ring is necessary because the gun body is a bit smaller and needs a little extra pressure in the housing. So obviously this is a solenoid shaft ring. We'll get this, let's put it back in place here. We'll get it together. Onto the solenoid. So solenoids made by Magnetic Sensor Systems. The company still exists. So I got an MQ2 and the solenoid wiring had been sheared off and I couldn't repair it. So I actually contacted Magnetic Sensor Systems, and they built me a brand new solenoid. It's not inexpensive. It cost me about $70 to get a new solenoid, but it turned a very rare item into a usable item again. So it's good to know that you can actually replace some of the parts still. Anyway, so the solenoid works like this. So there's a shaft inside the solenoid. That's where the solenoid shaft goes into. And the solenoid, if we don't know what a solenoid is an electromagnetic device. Electricity sent through the wire into a coil inside. It creates a magnetic field that either pushes or pulls the solenoid shaft. So the solenoid shaft, I believe, is steel or some sort of ferrous material, but I believe steel. Anyway, so every solenoid works in this way. Everyone has different ranges of motion, different power settings, all of that. This one basically actuates the shaft and pulls it back away from the seal, letting air in. This is the back of the solenoid housing. There's nothing fancy about it. It's just that the solenoid goes inside the housing and then screws to the head. Back here is the spacer. This is a spacer for a standard 2K cocker. It's maybe hard to see, but there we go. You can see it's threaded in the end. So that's for the cocking rod. In our case, the cocking rod's no longer used as a cocking rod. We're replacing the whole hammer and spring system in the back. So when you place it in, this end goes towards the IVG, this end goes towards the solenoid, and then we'll move on to the IVG. The IVG still exists, but its sole purpose is to cap the entire system. So you just screw it in until there's pressure. So I'm going to get back over here on the tripod, and we're going to get to replacing the seals on this thing. All right. So first thing we're going to do is replace the front seal on the Poppet. All you have to do is unscrew this little screw here. There, you'll notice there is a silver washer on there also. So in this case, this seal is probably okay, but I noticed that, I don't know if you can see it. See, it's a little worn, and that might be enough to lose pressure. So I'm going to replace it with a brand new one. So the problem with these seals is that they're not manufactured anymore. So I'll post in the description how to make your own. There's a certain type of plastic and size punches and whatever, and then after that they're essentially only a few cents a piece. So when you put it back on, you just want to make sure that you're completely centered and tighten it down. You want to make sure you don't tighten this too much, because it will actually cause the seal to bend a bit, and you don't want it to bend at all. So anyway, that looks pretty good. Next part is this back O-ring. I don't think this O-ring's got any problems, but I'm going to pull it anyway. I'd rather be positive everything's good. So just pop it off. Just like any other O-ring, pop a new one on there. I'm trying to do this around a tripod, so I apologize. It's not super easy. So I can fish it in there here. There we go. All right. Only thing you got to do is give it a little lube. Run the O-ring. Now there's a lot of debate as far as what's the best lube to use for a M2. Everybody's like Dow 33 or whatever. I use this Tech T gun salve. You can use whatever you want, really. It's up to you. You'll find what works best for you. I've had pretty good luck with this stuff. It's excellent lubricant. I'm not going to replace these O-rings. They're all okay. Next thing you do is you take the Poppet, you put it inside the valve, and then you look in there to make sure everything's sealed up okay. So we're good there. All right, so this O-ring we don't need anymore. Next step, the O-ring that goes in here is what seals against the solenoid housing. So we have to have it right there, and the spring goes in. So the springs will hold the Poppet forward, and then the spring gets compressed by the solenoid housing and seals against that O-ring, just like that. So what happens is there's pressure behind this system, and when the solenoid pulls back that plunger, the pressure is released, and it allows the Poppet to pop out just enough to let air through, and then the spring pushes it back once the pressure equalizes. So, all right, so that's the valve and the Poppet. All right, the next part we're going to look at is replacing the seal on the end of this. There it is, on the end of this solenoid shaft. So this seal, I believe, is still okay, but again, I'm having some velocity issues on this gun, and I want to make sure that I get it right. So just clean up the head of the seal as much as possible. So just like the Poppet seal, this is the exact same plastic, and it's just a punch that you punch out of the plastic. So I'm going to go ahead and seal this up with a little super glue. I'm just going to put a dab of super glue here. So you can see that all right. There we go. And I'm going to make sure this is aligned perfectly on the tip of the solenoid shaft here. Alright, so I'm going to let that dry for a little bit, but now I got a brand new seal on the tip. Now, just a short notice about that. That seal may not seal perfectly right away. So you're going to want to dry fire a lot and kind of get that seal to hammer into the head of the solenoid a few times, and that's going to help kind of create, I don't know if you'll be able to see it on this one. See that little teeny round indentation there? That indentation is going to be, it's going to create an indentation that's going to make a better seal over the housing of the solenoid head. So you can see in there. Let's see if I can get I can't get enough light in there. There's a little, there we go, little lip in there, and that's what presses against it. So in my case, I do need this particular washer. So we're going to put the washer in, and then the spring over the top. So now our solenoid shaft is completely ready to put inside the solenoid. So I'm going to put that shaft in there, just like that. Very simple. We're going to fish our wire into the solenoid head, and then we got to get it all together. There we go. Now, super important when we screw this together, we have to make sure that the solenoid doesn't spin inside of the housing. So as we thread this on, sometimes the pressure against the solenoid will cause the solenoid to spin. We have to be extremely careful with these wires. These wires are very, very, very thin, and they're delicate. So what I do is I just hold the wire against the front end of the solenoid housing, and I thread it together. Now it doesn't take a ton of pressure to seal this up. Just hand tight is good. So now our solenoid is ready to put in the gun. Now that all the seals are replaced in the valve, it's time to put it inside the gun. In this case, I'm using the Carnivore Killer. If you've seen me on Facebook or Custom Cockers, you might recognize this gun. So it's time to put it in. So the first part, valve goes in, spring pointed out. And a lot of times it's a little hard to get the valve into the gun through the threaded IVG threads. Right? It's just a little stiff. The O-ring catches on every thread. So I use my valve tool to push it in. Now, if you can see, I did align it so that the valve hole is pointed, there we go, up through the gun. So this will help me align the valve properly once I get it pushed up here. So you want to be extremely careful pushing the valve all the way forward. And then I use a pick, so we can get in here, focus, there we go. So I use a pick to align the valve right about there. Alright, so we got to look in there and make sure the O-ring is in there, and it looks like it unseated. So I use my pick tool to reseat the O-ring. It's very hard to see in there, so the O-ring's not cooperating here. There we go, I think we got it set. Now, if there's a problem with that O-ring or you're having a hard time, like a struggle with the O-ring in there, I tend to put a little bit of lube. The lube tends to just be slightly sticky and just enough to kind of keep that, focus, to keep that O-ring inside. So you can kind of see it sat there. Next part, and this is very, very important. You feed the wire. Let's do that again so you can see. You're going to feed the wire up through the sear hole, or the sear guide. This part's going to be very difficult, so I'm going to do my best to get it on camera because I have to use both hands and set it down. If you do not keep control of this wire while putting the IVG in, you will spin the solenoid inside the housing, or inside the body. If you spin the solenoid inside the body and you don't keep control of those wires, you're going to sear the wires clean off. Then you have to repair the wires or order a new solenoid. So the trick to that is to take a small Allen wrench behind the wire and feed it inside of the solenoid housing. So hopefully you can see that there. So I feed it inside the solenoid housing and I use that to prevent the solenoid from spinning. So the next part is going to be to install the spacer. Now this gun is a half block, so there's no cocking rod, and I don't need a cocking rod. But if yours has a cocking rod, you want to put the threaded part of the spacer in first. So here, oh, my lighting is terrible, sorry. I lost control of my O-ring again, so we're going to sit it in there and press it in. So I'm going to use my tool to press in the O-ring. So all I'm doing is pressing the solenoid housing against the O-ring to make sure it's sat in there. That O-ring has to be in that groove or this whole system doesn't work at all. So now that I have the solenoid in, now that I have the spacer in, it's time to thread a thread or two of the IVG. So I'm going to put the IVG in. Make sure we do it the right way. So in this particular gun, the IVG doesn't thread all the way in for me, because all I have to do is thread the IVG in until the solenoid housing presses against the valve. So if yours is different, you have a different type of gun, it might go all the way in, it might not go all the way in, sometimes you don't even need it. All that's important is that you're pressing that housing so that it makes a seal against that O-ring. Alright, so here comes the hard part. We're going to go ahead and protect our wires with an Allen wrench. And we're going to press fit this all together. Just make sure when you do this that you're not doing it too tight. You don't need to strip any threads. You don't have to do anything crazy. Just protect the wiring with an Allen wrench and tighten it all the way in. So I'm having a hard time doing this while on camera, but it looks like I was able to keep everything lined up nice and clean here. So let's see if I can get a little zoom. I don't think this camera can zoom like that. Alright, so we'll get a little closer to the camera here. There we go. So you see the wiring is protected inside the housing. It won't shear off. And then right there you can see where the housing meets the brass of the valve. You might also notice that the valve lined up in that hole a little better. So now we can put the set screw in there to hold the valve in place. That's it. The rest of it is very straightforward. I'll put together the frame, which you should know how to take off and put on, and then I'll show you where the wires go just to make sure we're thorough about it. And then I have to repair the RAM on this thing. It's leaking a little bit, but we'll get back together and do a quick shooting video. Okay, so we're ready to put the frame on the gun. And I realize there's a couple of things we should talk about with that too. So the regular E-blade wiring, sorry, this gun has brake beam eyes, so the wiring is a little messy. The regular E-blade wire follows the same channel as it always did inside the frame. This happens to be a carnivore frame. If you're not using a carnivore frame, then it'll just be straight through. So you run the wire straight through this groove right here, just like normal. However, since we don't have a frame sear or the pancake solenoid, the wire that comes out of the bottom of this body tucks in right where the sear would be to feed into the gun. Otherwise, you run the risk of pinching it when you screw the gun in. So that's the only real difference as far as putting the wiring into the frame. I'm not going to be able to do that. This requires 3 hands and I only have 1.5 while I'm recording. So I'm going to put this together and then we'll go over and kind of show how the wiring is inside. Alright, got the frame back on. We're ready to do the wiring. So the E-blade, this is an E2 board. The E1 board is going to look identical or very close to it. The Tadao board is going to look a little different, so you're going to have to figure that out if you have a Tadao board. But so the E-blade wiring is going to go in the first Molex slot here. And what I like to do is I like to use this pick tool to help press it in. Hopefully that helps you figure it out. Now, again, there's a lot of wiring in this particular one, so I try to organize as best as possible. I'm going to feed the MQ2 Molex into the second slot, which is the lower slot. So grab it with this pin. I'm going to press it in with my pick. Again, looks like that. So the E-blade front solenoid and the MQ2 solenoid. Now with this, I like to keep clean wiring if I can help it. So I tuck that wiring back into the pancake, where the pancake solenoid was. Keep it nice and clean. So I got to move the E-blade wiring and wire up my eyes. There we go, got my eyes wired. Now cable management is up to you. I tend to just kind of keep everything nice and tucked. I have to build new eyes and put some shrink wrap around the eyes, but for now they just kind of float inside the housing as best as I can tuck them in. And there we go. So it's ready to go. Let's get it put back together and we'll take a look and see if it fires properly. Alright, so we got to talk about how to air up your gun for the first time and how to set the gun regulator or the high pressure regulator so that it works functionally with the MQ2. So the way the MQ2 works is it leaks when it's too low and it leaks when it's too high. So you have a sweet spot. Hopefully with your gun, the sweet spot is somewhere between 310 and 260. So as long as your velocity is between 310 and 260, your gun is set. In between those two sweet spots, the low and the high, you can then adjust your high pressure regulator to match the field specifications as far as what you should be shooting speed wise. So the first thing you do is you turn your pressure all the way down on your gun. I believe on the CP it's all the way in. Hopefully I get this right here. So I'm going to turn it all the way in. So now I should have no pressure on the gun when I air up. Just as a heads up, sometimes this leaks on me and sometimes these leak. Obviously that's all pretty standard. Nice, no leaks today. They just decide when they want to leak or not leak. So as of right now, we'll go ahead and turn on the gun. So I have no air to the gun at all. So what we're going to do is we're going to listen close. I won't talk through this. We're going to listen close and we're going to air up the gun slowly. All right, there's a little puff of air. Still turning it up. Now eventually we should hear a leak as I get too high pressure. There it is. So now what I'm going to do is back off the gun a little, fire a shot, still leaking, back it off a little more, fire a shot, no more leaks. So that's kind of the sweet spot. That's where I'm going to go chrono. So I'm going to go ahead and fire off a few shots here. I apologize if it's loud. I got to turn the eyes off. There we go. Now it's ready to chrono. Now this particular gun is hard to switch barrels on. So I've had this caner back milled so that it fits freak inserts. The problem I have right now is I kind of sold all my inserts and all I have are really big ones. I think I have there we go, a 291 is the smallest I have right now. When you're chronoing with an autococker, it's very important that you bore the gun to get a consistent chrono. Right now, this gun won't fit any other barrels, and I'm not exactly sure why. So anytime I thread, so here's like a CP barrel, I try to thread it in and the tolerances are just a hair too tight, and other barrels won't thread into this gun. Ooh, maybe? Nope. So for whatever reason, this caner barrel goes right in, no problem. So I'm not going to show the chronoing video, or chronoing on video, because I don't have the right insert to chrono it properly. Unfortunately, it'll jump all over the place. It'll be 260, and then the next shot will be 300, and the next shot will be 290, and then 77, and then 88. So it's very important with an autococker that you bore properly. I did make a video, so if you want to see the video about boring and the difference between overboring and boring properly, watch that video. Anyway guys, thank you so much for watching. Hopefully you made it through the entire thing. I know it was long-winded, but if you are thinking about an MQ valve in your gun, don't be afraid of it. There's a lot to know and understand about it, but once you see it and have a clear understanding of how it works, it's extremely easy to use. It took all of the kick out of every gun I've ever put it into. There's no heavy hammer slamming back and forth inside the gun. You take out probably 5 ounces of weight from the hammer, the springs, the sear, the solenoid. You take a ton of weight off the gun too just by putting in the valve. So yeah, I hope that this video was educational to you. I hope to be making more videos in the future about either the MQ system, about autocockers, and hopefully eventually about any paintball related subjects. So if you have any requests or have any questions, I'm by no means an expert. I can just research and kind of present it to you in the best way possible. So thank you so much for watching. You guys have an awesome day. See you at the field.